Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. I appreciate that it's morning. You're taking time out of your morning, if you're on the West Coast, out of your lunch if you're on the East Coast, or various other times depending where you're at. We'll be talking about building the right information foundations for AI, and sharing some of the things that we've learned working with our clients in the past. My name is Gary Carlson. I'm one of the founders here at Factor, and Factor's focus, which is one of the reasons we're talking about this today, has always been about building foundations with your information to support various enterprise capabilities. And we see AI as an exciting but new one, new capability, new set of technology, but still the foundations, the data foundations that are necessary for other applications, other capabilities, still are necessary for the artificial intelligence work that we're seeing. So again, the focus today is data foundations, and we see this as essential for both mitigating the risks of using AI and to better realize the value of using AI. Now, there's been plenty of news, plenty of articles about folks having, some of the risks, some of the ways that AI people have been able, have had failures with AI, some of which has been very embarrassing or detrimental to folks. There's also been a lot of big wins with AI. We're not really going to talk about those today. I feel like there's been plenty of conversation around that. Really, we want to talk about, if you're going to use AI, what does it mean to build out the infrastructure necessary to truly take advantage of it, and to do it in such a way that you're going to mitigate the risks that are inherent with those tools. So logistics for today, presentation will be about 30 minutes. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation, but if you have questions while I'm speaking, please feel free to put them in chat. We'll keep track of those, and then we'll be able to answer them at the end. We will send out an email after the presentation is over, and that will include a link to the slides and some other information that we'll mention during the presentation itself. And just to help understand more about who we're speaking with today, I'm going to ask a few questions during this presentation and ask folks to put some answers into chat, or with a raised hand. So for practice right now, as we get started, can we have everybody type in where you're dialing in from in the chat right now, just to get used to using it and see where folks are from. Great. I see we've got folks from across the country, both coasts, and in the middle, we've got folks from Chicago, San Francisco, Philadelphia. We'll be in Philadelphia in about a month for the Information Architecture Conference. So I'm looking forward to that. Great. All right. Thanks everyone for doing that. And we'll be using chat a few more times through this. So I'm glad everyone is familiar with that. And let's get going. Oops. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is sort of set the stage about what we mean by AI and how we're thinking about it. And then we'll dig into the foundations work. And I thought it was really important to be able to think, as we think about artificial intelligence, remember that it comes in many different forms. People have been talking about artificial intelligence since 1956, and large language models are the latest iteration, certainly one of the most powerful instances we've seen for some things. But the notion of AI, the concerns around AI have been around for a while. And AI is a technology, and like most technologies that we're using in enterprises, it's fundamentally dependent on the data that it's fed. And that's really the premise for this presentation today, is how do we make sure we're feeding it the right data? The one thing that makes AI now a much different beast than it was just a few years ago is both the scale with which it can work, as well as the ease with which non-technical and technical users can interact with it. This opens up a lot of opportunities, a lot of capabilities that haven't been there before, But as we've seen in the news and various other places, it brings with it an awful lot of risk. And then the one thing I'm really just going to keep coming back to today is that AI is a technology, and fundamentally it's there to support people and organizations. And what we're trying to do is avoid thinking about it as an end in of itself. We really want to make sure that it's being used in a way that supports organizations or people or whatever the mission is of the folks interacting with it. And doing it in such and having the data there to make sure that we're doing that as well as possible. And just to bring a point home, the large language models, generative AI, is just one of many types of artificial intelligence. Emily Bender is a professor at the University of Washington. She's written extensively on artificial intelligence, how it should be used and its risks. And this is really just her list of a number of different types of artificial intelligence that have been developed over the time. And one important thing to keep in mind is that fundamentally, all these depend on data, and all of these have an output. And when we're in enterprises, complex environments, that means the data is generally coming from multiple places and being pushed to multiple outputs, which drives up the complexity and the potential risk of these projects even more. And this really shows how necessary it is to have your data well organized. And just so we all remember, this idea of needing good data for our technology has been around for a long time. This quote from Babbage was written in his book in 1864, which means he probably ran into these issues well before then. So even before we had electronic computers, even when they were still a bunch of gears and cogs and stuff like that being turned by a hand crank, people were still looking for a magic bullet. People were still hoping that if you just fed it whatever, you'd get the right answers you want. So this hasn't really changed. So I guess the first question to ask people is if they could just put in the chat, what type of things are your teams using AI for? So folks just put that in the chat. It'd be great to see how people are using it or planning on using it. So writing and research, great, yeah. Cool. Resumes and bios, a recommender. Yep, that was one of the things we saw in the Emily Bender's list. Process questions, right? We've been talking to some companies about that as well. Summarize and analyze. Yeah, we're using that summarizing and analyzing feature an awful lot here at Factor. Writing drafts. Yeah, I've used it a lot to just get that first draft going. Ideation. Yeah, so a lot of great uses here. I see a lot of these being sort of helping individual workflows, which is great. And I see a lot of these also being things that where the results are still being mediated by people at the end. So that's great. I think it's a great way of using it. All right, learn more about strategic approaches to my work, summaries, definition. Yep, all of these things are great to see. So thanks for everyone for putting those in. All right. So moving on, we're going to talk about the role of data and what it means to start building these foundations and why we need to do that. And I thought I'd start with a case study or summary of a project we did with a Fortune 10 client. They were building a chatbot to support some of their developers with support information. And this was a company we're working with. They obviously had definitive industry expertise, technology, and resources. And so we were brought in to really help them figure out what the ontology needed to be to support this chatbot. And honestly, as we went into this project, I was thinking, wow, working with this team, we're going to really have to reconfigure the way we look at projects. But it turns out our methodology worked pretty well. And what we were able to do and help them with, and what they really needed, was build an ontology or data structures that were solid enough that they could start developing technology on top of it. And what I mean by that is they needed to be able to answer questions, so that that meant the technology needed to be able to interpret the questions that were asked, and then understand how to turn those into queries, and then understand how to query a number of different data sets. And the ontology was an essential part of this because it sort of mediated all of those things. And once the ontology was solidified, or at least the major components of it or the structure of it, then they were able to start building technology on top of that. So it was really there to provide governance and stability as they went forward. And it also helped identify what their data was. They obviously had a lot of data available to them, but what they found was that their data was not AI ready. It wasn't chunked in ways that it needed to be chunked. It wasn't tagged in ways that was accurate enough to support this, answering specific questions and stuff like that. So that's really where this work came in, is to support the chatbot and also to support the content lifecycle. How do we tag the content and whatnot? And so our approach for this is, I was surprised how durable it was, even working with a sophisticated client, is we really always focus on alignment. How are your data sources aligned with your technology? How are they aligned with your business goals? How are your business goals aligned with your customers? Understanding all these parts of alignment and trying to figure out how to improve that alignment was the initial part, as that allows us to determine what type of models are necessary to support an initiative like this. Once we understand how the models, how the content needs to interact with the content and the users and the business goals, we're then able to build the ontologies, the taxonomies, the governance and maintenance plans, the analytics. All that stuff flows from that work. And the goal here really is to support AI so that it can support your organization and your customers. We want to make sure that we're getting the right information to your customer. As we went through this, and then once that's done, then you're able to start connecting all these pieces together. Make sure the content is being connected to the different systems, to the queries, to the chatbot. Make sure that the interfaces that are being used are connected to the users appropriately, and stuff like that. And real quickly, ask folks, when do you think this project was done? Folks just want to take a few guesses and put it in the chat. That would be great. Anybody have a guess when we were working on a project like this? Lisa got it on the first guess. Yes. It sounds like something that could be happening today, but we did this project in 2017. And I just bring that up to say that we could have had the same project now. So this happened before there was any notion of LLMs and the new wave of generative AI. But these foundations, I believe, are still in place and still essential. And so how this plays out is, when we're looking to build these data foundations, the first thing we want to do is really understand how an organization is working, what the enterprise environment looks like. And you can see at the bottom of this, we've got our foundations and our data models. And that's really where a lot of our focus was for that project, understanding the organizational alignment. Sometimes we run into projects where all the content exists, but various parts of it are created by different business units, and we can't get them to align what they're doing with this overarching goal. Same thing with user understanding and governance. But the goal here is to understand those things, figure out how to start that alignment, and then start building those data models. so that the systems and the endpoints can all be using the same data structures, all of which was essential for driving the top line capabilities, which is fundamentally what we're trying to address. Now, when you add AI to this, it really just looks like this. And our, top line capabilities haven't changed. Organizations still need to interact with their customers, still need to support their employees, still need to meet regulatory needs, still need to run analytics and measure their business, meet compliance issues. None of those have changed with AI. I think that's one of the things I want to make, clear is that AI is here to support those fundamental business capabilities. And most of the systems still exist. AI is from working with clients who are trying to figure out where to best integrate AI. What we're finding is that it's really, in some cases, it might be doing some of the work of these old systems, but a lot of times it's supporting them, or supporting the endpoints, allowing the interfaces to be richer, allowing the systems to take better advantage of their data. But at the end of the day, all of this stuff is still there. And I'm sure AI is going to replace, some of these systems will become more and more AI dependent. And, but at the end of the day, if you've got a CRM system, it needs the data about your customers. That data needs to be collected somehow. It needs to be managed. And you need to understand what your customer is. So you need that foundational understanding of your customer model so that you can measure it going forward. So real quick, if we can have folks just put in the screen in the chat, which of these top line capabilities are you currently pointing your organization's AI at? Where do your organization see the biggest benefit going forward? Yeah, I think analytics is a big one. Unifying data silos, sales enablement, yep. Customer experience. Great. Yeah, so that's really how we see this, is an enabler of these things. And one of the reasons we keep coming back to this notion of foundations, because those top line capabilities aren't going away. And organizations need to drive growth, customer satisfaction. All of those things still exist. And all of those things are driven by those capabilities. And if AI is going to work and we're going to avoid or minimize the risks that are involved with it, we need these foundations in place. So we're going to go more. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what our approach to thinking about this, our approach to building these foundations. And we really see the foundations falling in 4 different categories. One, driving stability, so that your development team can work with a consistent framework. So your marketing team knows what it's selling or what it's interacting with. So your customer support team has a consistent list of products and problems that they're trying to address. So you can do analytics over time, those types of things. User focus is an essential part of these foundations, making sure you understand your users and the evolving needs of your users so that your data and your content and the way your AI is tuned and trained is meeting their needs. The models is a big focus of factors. How do you describe your customer? How do you describe your products? How do you describe your sales process? What is a campaign? All of these things are essential. And then alignment across the organization. So under stability, really we're talking about governance, documentation, and maintenance. And the governance is essential because this is what provides the transparency necessary to evolve the models that you have, while at the same time allowing people to build and make decisions based on what they currently have. I debated whether or not to put documentation in here, but in some of our recent projects, it's really turned out to be the foundation, an essential part of addressing these issues at an enterprise level is to take the time to write down what these models are, how they work, what the governance processes are, what the goals are, just so that everybody can come to a common place and understand what's going on. And sometimes these documents don't get read that much, but just the process of getting it documented and written down is a huge way of bringing everybody together. And then another part of stability is having dedicated maintenance. This isn't a one and done type thing. This is a ongoing evolution of the process. You're constantly updating, maintaining your products, your software, your website. It's the same thing for your data foundations. User focus. Every time we create a new feature, we change the way people think about your products. And so their goals, their expectations are going to change. We need to be constantly understanding what the user's goals are, how they want to interact with us as an organization. Or if it's employees, understand what their needs are so they can get their work done. So at the beginning, making sure that your models and your governance processes meet the needs of your users is really important. And then making sure that's integrated into your overall process. And then also having the harnesses necessary to be gathering analytics day in and day out to really make sure you're hitting the mark of where you want to go. Models, again, this is sort of one of Factor's big focuses is building these models. And they do a number of things for the initiatives. First, they're a place where the organization aligns around its key terminology and agrees on fundamental concepts, like what's a customer, a product, a campaign, how do we measure profit? In one client, they're trying to create some new analytics on year-over-year sales for their products, for their product lines. And it took them 3 months to even define what a product was, because we couldn't measure it until we had that definition. That was an extreme example, but we've seen this with many companies where having that product definition was a key part of moving forward with a number of different things. Same thing with what's a customer versus a prospect versus a partner. I'm sure many of you have run into this before. Also, these models are a place where business owners and technical owners can come together and communicate with each other. This is where the technical team can say, this can be implemented and this can't. And it's where the business team can say, oh, we need this for this particular business reason. It's a great way to, it's a great leveling feature to be able to have these conversations. And then once they're created, they provide the Rosetta Stone for the organization, driving system integration and experiences so that everyone can go to one place to start building and integrating. So we see these models as an essential part of the foundations. One of my last questions for this presentation, really, I'd like ask folks on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being that every system has its own product list, and 4 being that everyone in the organization can provide the key components of a product. Where do you think your organization is from a 1 to 4? Again, 1 being massive number of silos, 4 being everyone being able to sing off the same song sheet. I'm seeing a lot of 2s and 1s. Yeah, so when folks are addressing the risks of AI or tuning it to get, from 70% results to 85 to 90% results, however you're going to measure that, this can be a big part of that process, is coming around and aligning around these key concepts. And this isn't an AI issue. This is a organizational issue. All right. And then the next part of these foundations is really the alignment. Do you have not only executive buy-in, but executive strategy and engagement? Building these foundations often requires crossing multiple business units, multiple use cases, multiple user profiles. That type of complexity fundamentally needs an executive who can help drive or dictate or support the strategy. Alignment also requires content information strategy that's shared across the organization. So how are we creating content? What's good content? What's not good content? How are we going to measure it? It requires that the IT teams, the business teams, and the operations are all involved in working together. This isn't a waterfall like, oh, here's some content, here's the results we need. It's all these things come together. The thing we saw with that chatbot example I gave you earlier was the developers initially thought we were just going to go create an ontology and they were going to be able to build off it. But it became really clear very quickly that what we built fundamentally depended on what they wanted to do with it. So we had to turn it into more of an iterative cycle as opposed to a waterfall approach. And then all the other part of alignment, this sort of goes back to the executive strategy, executive engagement, is making sure there's appropriate staffing and technology investment. These types of things can't have to, some of this has to be somebody's day job. And so that's sort of the overarching sort of how to build these, how to think about these foundations. Talk a little bit about how we think about it and practically how we go into it. When we see these types of engagements, whether it's with AI or search or knowledge management or sales enablement, all these initiatives have an experience layer and a technical layer. All the data lives in a system, all the functionality lives in the system, and all of it gets expressed through an experience, through a website, a portal, a dashboard, something like that. And as we're building out these foundations, fundamentally, we think that what we're talking about building here is the information layer. What are the models, the governance processes, the maintenance necessary to define these things for you as an organization so that your systems can all know how to make system integration much easier, allow your experience that solid foundation to build off of, and start to build these things out. So the way we see it, if you're going to build this foundation, you fundamentally need to, have a common view of your content object, the models, the attributes and metadata, taxonomies, and then your governance and maintenance plans. Without these, each AI initiative is going to be a new adventure. You're going to lack the cohesion necessary to take something from a proof of concept to a full enterprise application. And this is, I don't know how easy this is to read on the screen, but it'll be in the deck that's available to you. But really just wanted to show how these foundations impact, some of your core capabilities. On the left-hand side there, we've got search, personalization, analytics, content operations, knowledge management, product merchandising, and then machine learning and AI in the bottom there. And what we're showing here is that when you've got unstructured data, the machine learning and to some extent search can interact with that data, but it's kind of, you don't have a lot of control over it. But as you start to have better structured data, as you start to build out your ontologies and taxonomies that are used to describe and model the data, and then as you start to build out the knowledge graphs that these can all sit on, each one of these becomes more powerful, especially the artificial intelligence. The more information you can give it, the better the results you can get from it. So this is my final slide, but really what I was hoping to get across today and hope folks come away with is that we definitely recognize that AI is an extremely powerful tool, but business is still business. It needs to connect with customers, take care of employees, and meet regulatory requirements. while also building and maintaining its brand. So we're in an exciting time with AI and its new capabilities, but business and information fundamentals have not changed as a result of this. And if your data is not AI ready, there's a huge risk in terms of opportunity cost, bad results, or legal and privacy issues if you don't build these foundations.